Star Trek 57, M23, take 2.
Star Trek Podcast.
Take care, Commander. He has friends, and friends of his kind mean power. And power is danger.
Danger and I are old companions.
We've seen 100 campaigns together, and still I do not understand you.
I think you do. No need to tell you what happens the moment we reach home with proof of the Earthmen's weakness. And we will have proof. The Earth Commander will follow. He must. And when he attacks, we will destroy him. Our gift to the homeland. Another war.
If we are the strong, is this not the signal for war?
Must it always be so? How many comrades have we lost in this way?
Our portion, Commander, is obedience.
Obedience. Duty. Death and more death. Soon even enough for the Praetor's taste.
Didn't this episode seem rather familiar? There's something familiar about this episode.
I can't put my finger on it. I just don't know.
It just reminded me of
what's
something,
going on
another
here?
episode.
What's going on here?
All right. This is the It's Got Star Trek podcast. We usually welcome people to it.
You're not welcome today.
No.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Get the heck out of here.
Welcome, Dan.
Welcome to the It's Got Star Trek
You're
podcast.
back.
Welcome.
Dan is back in studio.
I don't have to look at you from a screen.
Not
Now
on
you-
Zoom anymore.
From afar, from a screen.
So, yes, this week, It's Got Star Trek number 141.
How do you even know that?
Because he keeps track,
keep
man.
track. I put the numbers in.
I stopped keeping track like
on the computer.
20 episodes.
Jesse used to be
ago.
the king of keeping track.
Well, yeah, mostly. And then
But little do we know that Patrick was secretly doing it like
sometimes
this whole time.
I would get it wrong.
I'm just keeping track of I'm not keeping track of any of the other shit. Just the number on the.
He's keeping score.
Anyway, it's episode 141 of the podcast.
Patrick, you win this time.
And
No, you're keeping score.
and
Just you wait.
and you made me think of the Hamilton musical. Just
Oh.
You Wait.
I've never seen that.
Me neither, but I know I've listened to all the
We
music.
should watch it on a podcast.
Yeah, we can watch it all together. All right, okay. All right. And we're
commentary?
dilly-dallying.
Yeah, it's dilly.
This week, we are discussing Star Trek, the original series, classic episode, Balance of Terror.
Now, according to Paramount
Balance
Plus,
of Terror.
it's season 1, episode 15. But
But it's
according,
14.
But others say 14.
I think the generally accepted thing is 14. However,
Yeah.
we have to recall that Star Trek, the original series, is indeed so ancient that that the records are not clear.
Ancient.
Because they
And
didn't have standards back then.
Well, no, it's not that they didn't have standards, but there were perhaps different standards, and that competing philosophies have evolved over time from the original text.
and they
of Star
never
Trek.
laid out anything from the start to say it is this way.
Well, maybe Gene Roddenberry did at some point say something or another, but the fact is some people count,
Gene
different
Roddenberry did.
episodes as different lengths,
And why don't they do that for other series? is
Well,
what
they
I'm saying.
did. TNG gets a little of it too.
Okay.
Right, a little bit of
Little
it,
bit.
right?
A little bit.
Just saying.
A little bit.
I think it's a good example.
You know.
It's a good example of
Little
how
bit.
you can have a singular text that is over time interpreted in different ways by different factions.
Which is crazy to think that it's only been, what, like 70 years? 60, wait,
What?
more like 50, 60 years?
60 years.
60 years?
This aired on December 15th, 1966.
Get out of the
So-
city.
So not quite 60, but almost.
I will refer to it as the 14th episode of the first season
It's
of
just
Star Trek
usually when we
TOS.
talk about things lost to the past, we're talking about thousands of years ago.
You get it. Well, I get where you're going, and
It's almost
Are
like
you picking
it's
up what I'm putting down?
1,000. It's
I think it
it's
happens-
from a previous century.
I think it happens pretty quick. It happens pretty quick. Differing philosophies emerge. All right,
Everything happens at the same time.
Balance of Terror. And yes, we are discussing Balance of Terror this week because last week we discussed the Star Trek Strange New World Season 1 finale,
Oh, that's what it was.
A Quality
Yeah.
of Mercy.
Yeah.
Jesse is being sarcastic. His humor is so dry. So dry. That
And I sound like a fool.
you may have perceived that.
It's so dry, he's growing cactuses out of it.
All right. Settle down. We're
Jesse's growing cacti out of his humor.
Yeah.
We're just let's ease into it.
I've got cacti growing out of my humor.
Give me some water.
Let's ease into it. Let's start with the actual
take it-
humor
take it
before we get
slow.
into the esoteric stuff that our fans love so much. All right. Yes, but last week's episode, A Quality of Mercy, was inspired by and piggybacked upon the Balance of Terror episode that we're discussing today. Last week we discussed many of the similarities and overlaps and influences, etc., of Balance of Terror on that episode. This week we'll just focus on just straight up Balance of Terror.
Bounce of Terror.
This is a classic episode. At the top of the list when it comes to best episodes of TOS, and then occasionally even best episodes of Star Trek.
It is.
more
Yeah,
generally.
It is really. It's really awesome. It's very suspenseful, and it's this back and forth duel. Like they keep making moves on each other. I found it.
It's like a submarine. It's one of them.
It's a submarine movie.
And I
episodes.
actually
It's a submarine movie straight up. Makes me want to watch Hunt for Red October.
So I went through. Actually, I don't think I'm going to read this because it ended up being more than I expected. I went through the whole episode and sort of marked.
Wait. Were you implying you were going to read the entire episode?
No, not the. No. But what I wrote was.
Dan reads Star Trek.
I wrote.
you've written a significant number of notes.
Well, no. What I
And
wrote
right now you're going to distill those notes into a more entertaining format.
If you let me finish, you'll find out. And would have found
He's
out
not
5
gonna
seconds
let you
ago.
finish.
I do intend to do so. However, you've made
But
me
not for a
curious.
little bit.
You made me curious as to what would happen if I did not let you finish.
Let's not find
I know
out.
what's going to happen. I know what's going to happen.
I basically wrote down all the moves that were made because this episode was a series of moves on both
Oh, yeah,
sides.
okay.
Ooh,
yeah,
that's-
yeah.
but
Go for it.
I
dude.
can jam through it.
Plot it out.
I can jam through it real quick, but it is several.
We should
several
war
ten-
game.
I
I
It's a lot of-
enjoy
it is a lot of
your
lines.
lists, and it's been a little while
This
since
is
we've had
like
a good
longer
Dan
than
list.
a list. This is like kind of a lot. This
It's a
is
saga.
probably like it ends on 164 to about 121.
Why are you giving us these details? How about this?
It's a lot of lines.
This
How
guy's
about-
into detail.
How about you start, right? Your
Secrets in the
job
sauce.
is to you've done the work. You've done the research to plot out these moves, as you'd say. So that's your responsibility, is to convey that as succinctly and clearly, but also as thoroughly as possible. It is the duty of Jesse and I to squeeze some entertainment out of that. And so that's our task for this break.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's see if we can manage that, because I want to, where there's a lot to talk about. We want to talk about racism against Spock. We want to talk about the Romulan commander and sort of the Romulan ethos, what's going on there, and
Mark
some sort of
Leonard.
anti-war message. There's a lot to talk about, but let's start with this excessively long list.
Bring it on.
Bring it on.
Accept
the list.
the challenge.
All right. I was sort of vamping there
Dan's
for you because I thought
list.
you were about to start, but audience, Dan is staring intently at his laptop.
He's tippity tapping.
He's moving up and down the scroll bar, and he's scratching his beard.
Mm-hmm.
He has a beard, this guy.
Well, I guess I start. This is interesting because
I'm already enjoying it.
Because I think
I'm sorry
I
if the
feel
audience isn't. For me, this is a
I feel like
this is a thoroughly entertaining time.
my notes are all out of okay. Oh, here we go. I found it. Oh, phew. I was worried. I began when the star, when they were going to go through that star to catch him when they went through the star. Remember the Romulans are going through. I thought that's
The comet. You're talking about the comet.
Shooting
Icarus,
star.
Icarus 4. I thought that's where my notes are, and I was like, that's ridiculous. A lot more happened, and I found them in the right spot. This is okay. This is it.
I do
Computers.
enjoy learning more about your process. This is sort of the
Me
behind,
too.
the behind the scenes process. All right,
Okay,
go
so
for it.
it begins with Enterprise. The outposts 2 and 3 are obliterated. Outpost 4 has Hansen. The Romulan ship shoots plasma ball at it and explodes in front of him. The ship plasma ball. Romulan plasma ball. Yes, let's not go back there. The ship disappears. It's the Romulans. Enterprise, they have a blip that can detect motion, but they can't see it. I thought a cloak meant you couldn't even detect them, but apparently they can detect them through their sensors.
You could. Well, there was always the thing where you could see their exhaust.
Well, they figured that out in Star Trek 6.
Yeah, that's
Other times with cloaking devices, it will be either you get lucky if you happen to be looking at them, you might see the shimmer in the stars or something like that.
The micro lensing.
I thought they mentioned essentially the same exhaust situation.
No, that was when they fired the missile. They saw the exhaust of the missile.
Oh, the missile.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's when Kirk was like, fire.
This one, it was, but in every time they've had cloaking device, there's always been, or much of the time, there's been some way where you can be like, ooh, we got a hint of where they are. Even if you can't see them outright.
Right. And so in this one, there seems to be a dissonance between what their sensors read and what they can see. So anyways, they're set, because going through the star, that was going to be what they were seeing. Anyways, so... The comet. Sorry, I'm sorry.
I'm only making that correction because of the emails.
You're absolutely right. I know.
Yeah,
I even
the science nerds are going to get you.
I even wrote it down as a comet, and I still just...
He keeps saying star.
So, okay, so why is he doing that? Why is he
They
doing
are vastly different celestial objects.
Let's not listen.
Though both quite beautiful.
Let's not listen. Quite beautiful. Let's not listen. They have this blip.
A comet wouldn't be a comet without the star providing the heat to melt the material inside and cause the sublimation.
Ice.
The material sublimates to form the beautiful tail. When comets are floating around out,
Tailipo.
I love it. No, not
far,
the
they're just a hunk of ice.
Dan likes a good tailipo.
Oh man, I don't know about that. They have this Enterprise has this blip that can detect motion, but they can't see it. Okay, so the Romulans they're all strolling about. They don't look after ship got blown up. They don't seem concerned because the Enterprise thinks that the Romulans can't see them. So Romulans think, oh, they haven't seen us yet. So they're headed to the neutral zone to get the fuck out of there. And so Kirk's like, nuh-uh. And so he mimics the movements of the Romulan ship to make them think that the Enterprise is just a reflection of some kind. Of what?
A sensor reflection.
A sensor reflection. We don't know. That phenomenon wasn't... What phenomenon
that
would
is
be
based
responsible
off
for that?
of, as many things, particularly in older Star Trek are, where so many of the people, Gene Roddenberry, the writers, so many of the production staff served in World War II, many of them in the Navy, but in other units as well. With radar, especially early radar, you get radar reflections.
Okay.
You could get reflections off of clouds and other things. I'm speaking
the ionosphere.
From no position of authority. I'm extrapolating from little bits and pieces of information I've collected over the course of my life.
I'll buy
but
that.
It makes sense, and if said authoritatively, I think it's a valid point to make.
I think saying it authoritatively is key because they never really go into too much detail about that, but it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. What you're saying makes sense. We can sort of, intuit what they mean.
That makes sense.
So far...
Their maps are all funny looking anyways. So.
Their maps rule.
So to recap so far, the Romulans...
Okay.
No, I'm just saying, this is what began the whole thing.
I got it.
I'm going to repeat what I just said.
Yes, that's what I was going to say.
What happened again?
I have been known to do
I'm
things
all
like that.
about filling up content in this first break,
but there's a limit.
To a certain extent, there's a limit.
So just so we know what the Romulans did, what they did is they went into the neutral zone and they fucked a bunch of shit up. They just blew up like 3 different outposts. Okay?
Well, the outposts weren't in the neutral zone. They were actually just outside of the neutral zone on the Federation side.
Okay, so the Romulans were in there and blew it up. It's even worse.
It's a worse...
the Romulans are always in the neutral zone. I may have said this before, but whenever they get near the neutral zone, there's always Romulans are just already in there. And somehow they're not violating the treaty.
Well, they are, but the Federation policy, I don't know how long that continued, but it was interesting that Kirk expressly stated, he was like, oh, by the way, the treaty says this, but the Federation policy is like, they can fuck up our shit a fair amount before we're willing to start a whole fucking war with them.
Right, and that's what I wrote is Kirk.
It must have been a fucked up war.
And Kirk insists that they don't go in the neutral zone unless he orders them for it. That's what happens at this point. Because I guess they're concerned if they go into the neutral zone, the Romulans will be able to come up with some story and say they came into our neutral zone, so they could distill what's it called when you make things less thick? When you pour a bunch of water in the Kool-Aid? When dilute, yeah. They would dilute the blame. They would worry. Maybe they're trying to worry about diluting.
Well, in theory, if you go in the neutral zone, one-on-one, ship to ship, the other ship blows you up, then they're the one who are They're the ones who are telling the story.
You'd think there would be some records to prove that you weren't a part of that situation.
Yeah, but you blow things up
They got all
thoroughly
them
enough.
tapes when they go.
Yeah,
those tapes. Those tapes, those little. It was either.
It was like a disc.
It looked like a block of wood.
It was straight up wood.
Yeah, it was a diskette.
It was a beveled
Went conk.
piece of wood. And the funny thing about discs is Star Trek invented discs before we had discs, and then now discs aren't even used anymore. So like we've lapped Star Trek on this and many other topics.
Fuck you, Star Trek.
That's a topic of a whole other podcast.
Yeah, they need and their system needs to be more modular. So Kirk insists that they don't go in the neutral zone unless he orders. Okay, so now what happens is somehow the Enterprise can see inside of the Romulan bridge based on a communication that the Romulans are having.
They intercepted the unauthorized communication by that Romulan. I don't remember what rank he was.
The one who got knocked down a couple ranks.
I don't think we heard what his rank was, because he wasn't a Centurion.
The Centurion was that old guy.
That's the same guy in the other episode that's causing all the trouble.
I believe they're intended
that
Romulan Worlds episode.
I was trying to think of like where I'd seen that. I bet you in Rick and Morty there's Bird Person. It seems like Bird Person was
the same helmet.
Bird Person wears a Romulan helmet.
I never thought about that before.
Basically, that dummy was trying to gloat about their victory to the bosses and be like, "Look, we're so cool. Look at us!" And like
the Praetor's pride.
But okay, so they intercepted that, but somehow that allowed them to see inside of the bridge. I don't know how that managed. Maybe they used super sound technology to formulate an image based on sound, but I don't know.
It's somewhat ludicrous.
Yeah. Okay. So Anyway, so it was broadcast, because that's when I didn't actually put that part together at first.
Because otherwise the guy is sending a message to the Praetor where he's not even really on screen and he's not saying anything at the moment, and it's just some people milling about.
Mm-hmm. So it's
forgivable.
So according to the script that I was reading off of chuckotea.net, in the script it says, after they see the Romulans on the bridge, the script says, Spock's eyebrows hit the ceiling.
Wow.
There's a long silence and a lot of stares. And then Uhura gives Spock the wood tape for the transmission, because she's like, look, broke transmission, here's a record of it, okay? So now we jump over to the Romulan ship. As the Romulan ship starts to decloak from power consumption, because it uses up a lot of power, the Romulan commander suspects that the Enterprise isn't a reflection at all. He's like, this is not, man.
All right.
And then the dummy Romulan dude admits that he risked the safety of the ship and to go to the supervisors, and we see the commander.
Supervisors, yeah.
The commander is tired of all this Romulan bullshit. The commander's like, I'm sick of this shit. Which is interesting, because that happened early on in this episode with Quality of Mercy. That didn't really happen more until the end. I mean, the Romulan dude was talking to his sub-commander in Quality of Mercy about like, hey, I don't know about all this. But it wasn't quite in the same way. We didn't really see the commander.
Well, there was less of a focus. And again, and we discussed this. We discussed this last week. It was a different. There were more characters involved, more pieces. This week it was that one-on-one thing, and we got to see the enemy side, which we don't always get to see. Not just in Star Trek, just in media in general.
You're talking about this episode.
Yeah, this episode. Yeah. And I thought that was an important part. Obviously, it's an important part of this episode. But you could see them write this episode in a different style, similar to what they did on Enterprise when they were dealing with the Romulans and other, like where you don't ever actually see the other people, and it's all about the reactions, and you're getting the clues the same time the crew is getting the clues. You can make a good story doing that, but this one it was useful to have that perspective of the Romulans. First of all, it's just cool to see a new alien race and introducing the whole idea of their relationship to the Vulcans and all that other stuff. But it's that you can empathize with them, right? Because if you don't see them,
one dude looks like Sarah.
You can't empathize. You can't empathize with them if you don't see them, if you don't hear them, if you don't listen to them having their own little debates.
Right, and amongst themselves. And I mean, the whole episode, it really puts across this feeling. We all know what goes on with the Romulans, but still somehow manages to
We all know. That sounds like prejudice to me.
We're all familiar with Romulan activity. Wait, that doesn't sound any better. But this episode, it puts across this feeling of mystery over a new species that they haven't seen in 100 years. I mean, I think this episode did a really good job of putting that across. This feeling of exploration and discovery, along that the shit comes with it. I felt anticipation learning about these Romulans, even though I already am familiar with it. And so, and part of that is the way they went back and forth and gave you like private conversations that to show that they're not these evil monsters or whatever, or they just have their own form of duty.
I like the Romulans.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk more about that in the next break when we discuss some of the war stuff, because I think there's but you're absolutely right. There's a lot. All right, what's the next move on the list?
So Commander's tired of all this Romulan bullshit after Romulan dude sends that message out. Back at the Enterprise, Romulan has
back at the ranch.
Ranch Doritos. The Romulan ship has
Cool Ranch Doritos in some places are just called like
American or
American.
something? Yeah, I think so.
American flavor.
Yeah, American flavor.
And I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
As a United States citizen, that is one thing I'm okay with.
So the Romulan ship has
than some of the other stuff
I don't like it when you go to Italy and order like an American pizza and they just put a bunch of like hot dogs on it.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of sliced hot dogs.
Fuck that.
It's like, are you fucking with us? Is
I was
that a
watching
joke?
I was watching a YouTube channel. He was talking about American dishes in other countries, and one was like in Finland or Iceland or something, where if you you went to this place, ordered an American pizza, and they gave out a cheese pizza, and then they opened up a can of creamed corn and dumped it all over the pizza.
I was in Oxfordshire, where there was a restaurant in the 90s called Fatty Arbuckles, and it was like fine American cuisine, and they served like a half-inch thick boiled steak, a can of tomato soup, and then for the dessert, it was like a liter of ice cream that had whole grapes and chunks of orange in it.
Yeah, I think our friend Dave had a shirt that.
There was like a whole challenge. If you were able to eat everything, you would win the T-shirt.
That's definitely an American. They
sounds
got
like
that part right.
That sounds like British food.
Well, yeah, it was a British restaurant,
so
serving their version of American food.
They could have at least had like fried chicken or something.
Yeah, I'll go to I'd rather go to the Chippy or get some
Nando's.
Yeah, go get some Nando's.
For real.
So back at the Enterprise, we know.
Enterprise.
So we're gonna have to ignore like little funny. I know. Say what you want to say.
Gonna have
but
to know.
I'm always amazed at how hilarious you think it is when I misplace a consonant.
I don't think it's hilarious.
Hilariously misplaced consonants.
I'm like a Tolkien elf filled with light and joy, the Hobbit style one, not the Lord of the Rings. I'm just prancing through the woods, saying tra la la, tri li li, and laughing gaily.
That's
at
more
things.
like a Kender from I used to read the Dragonlance books, and Kender were.
I'm not as familiar with that mythology.
I think
they had like top knot kind of hair, long hair.
That was their deal.
It was their version of a halfling hobbit type.
Yeah, but wasn't Dragonlance kind of part of the D&D world because there was Forgotten Realms?
D&D,
it was. There's Forgotten Realms. Dragonlance.
That was a different one.
But the Dragonlance I only knew as books, but I guess it was still part of the. Anyways, whatever. It doesn't matter.
It started out as books.
When I was a kid, TV was called Books. Oh. All right, continue.
Okay.
This is a television program we're talking about. Name a Star Trek.
Okay.
You might have heard about it.
You might have heard about it.
Heard about this Star Trek stuff.
I'm going to talk about the show. So Commander's tired of all this Romulan bullshit. He's like, man, war is not as cool as they made it seem. So back at the Enterprise, we find out that the Romulan ship has impulse. Only the Enterprise cannot run them.
That you just have to pretend is not true because it's ludicrous, and every other Star Trek series has retconned that. Because at the time, I think they were trying to say they don't have warp, but they've got the cloaking device, and that was some way to
the way to balance out the points.
I
was wondering if it was because maybe their cloaking requirements meant they didn't have enough energy left for anything from impulse.
And I think an important point to make is they don't state with certainty that they don't have warp drive here, right? And they talk about the power issue. So it's quite possible that that's really the issue. They don't have sufficient power to have both the cloak and the warp at the same time. And we can easily make that our headcanon.
That was back in the day.
Well, back in the day, what?
It was back in the day. The technology wasn't as good. Like, it's a 22nd.
Well, they kind of make the Romulan ship out
23rd.
To seem kind of tanky. Like it has these two very powerful devices. It has the cloaking, which just uses up a lot of power, and they have the Romulan plasma ball that uses up a lot of power.
Ball,
so
man.
I guess you could say they're these big lumbering, gonna punch you in the face kind of ship or something. But yeah, it's whatever. The Enterprise seems more maneuverable.
Like warp like all backwards, all super fast to get away from the ball.
Yeah,
and it dissipated a bunch, but the ball still hit them. Yeah.
So, anyways, the Enterprise were
dissipated.
For whatever reason, the Enterprise is more maneuverable than the Romulan ship. So Then they have a meeting. The Enterprise, they have a meeting. Styles, Sulu, and even Spock. Styles is the navigator, the navigator with all the issues with the Romulans. Sulu and even Spock, they want to attack so as not to look weak. Even Spock is like, we dare not try or whatever.
It works out logically.
Styles may not be the navigator. He might just be the ops officer.
I'm pretty sure
they called him Spock called him the navigator.
Yeah,
did he? All right,
I'm pretty sure.
right.
Anyway,
point taken.
And he's got a gold. He's got a gold shirt, so he's not ops.
So after suggesting
colors are all complicated. Okay, I always get confused.
So after suggesting blanketing shots,
They'll switch it up all the time.
So after suggesting that they blanket shots using sensors, which is inaccurate and risks giving away their position, Enterprise sees Comet Icarus 4. As Kirk pronounces it, I would say Icarus.
I know,
but,
right?
I think it's I would say Icarus.
Shatner's Canadian. What
are you gonna do?
They say process. They say
At one time in the episode, Kirk says sensor. At one point in the episode,
Sensor.
he does say sensor, but that must just have been a fluke. So Enterprise sees Comet Icarus 4, and with it, an opportunity to gain visibility of the Romulan ship due to it coating their ship like water on an invisible naked person. So that was the plan that the Enterprise is going for, basically. So back at the Romulan ship, while Enterprise thinks that the comet particles will reveal the cloaked ship's position, Romulans say that it will obscure the Enterprise's sensors. Not sure why they believe different things, but I think they kind of hint around it.
I think both things are true.
I think it's just a clever cat and mouse game going on.
Totally.
Or I mean, not both things are true, but both things are conceivable.
I think it's just the way things went down. Yeah. So the Enterprise... So the Romulan ship, so this is what happens. So the Enterprise at this point stops mirroring the Romulan ship because their sensors are all screwed up from the particles coating the ship. So while the particles help see the Romulan ship while simultaneously costing them the ability to track through sensors. This is going back to at the beginning of the episode where they couldn't see them, but they could only see them through the blip of the sensors, right? The motion sensors, but they couldn't see them. Now what they're trying to go for is to see them visually, but at the cost of their motion sensors. You see what I'm saying? It's the opposite. But they didn't know.
I will tell you, quite honestly, I'm starting to get a little bit lost. I'm very familiar with this episode.
Okay, well, it's okay.
But I don't want that to. I don't want that to hinder you. I think probably everything you're saying makes total perfect sense. I'm just getting a little confused.
Yeah, before they were saying, we can't see them, but our sensors can detect them while they're cloaked. It's like, we can't see them, but our sensors can detect them. Now, the ship going through the comet goo, you can see them, but as the Romulan said, it will obscure the sensors. So now the sensors are totally obscured, and the Enterprise did not see that coming.
All right.
There seems to be...
Yeah, and there was that shot where it goes like through the whole... They go through like the length of the comet almost, and out the tail, and then it goes into blank space, and they're like, oh, where are they?
Mm-hmm. So there seems to be a dissonance between visuals and sensors. Each one seems to have their pros and cons, basically. They gained visual loss sensors. As a result of all this...
Professional athletes and confidence tricksters.
What?
Pros and cons.
Oh, okay. Damn, that was...
Gotcha.
You got me. I had no idea what the fuck you were talking about.
That was not an effort to get you.
Well, you did.
But you got.
I got. So moving on. As a result of all this, the Romulans see because of this, the Romulans see that the Enterprise lost the capability to mirror, and they figured out that this whole time, it wasn't a mirror. It was the Enterprise the whole time.
Yeah, but the commander kind of knew that already.
He had a feeling.
He wasn't stupid.
They had a feeling, but this is the point where he's saying, look, they've broken off the mirror. And that's when they said, evasive maneuvers. The Romulans said evasive maneuvers, and they broke off because they figured out.
Well, he confirmed his initial assumption.
Yeah. So anyways, the Enterprise blankets the area with shots like Styles originally suggested, which hit the ship. The Centurion goes down.
They got a good spread with all them shots.
Yeah, the Centurion goes down with that, leisurely falling piece of the ship that kind of bounced off of him.
It's funny that
those bulkheads
you saw how
containers or whatever.
Like, why can't you just say fire phasers and they push a button from the bridge? There was some kind of whole fire control.
We mentioned that last
crew.
Yeah, we mentioned that last week. Is like on an aircraft carrier or something where you have to send a series of signals and commands, and then somebody has to turn a crank and load a torpedo tube.
There was a whole bunch of enlisted and officers down there in phase control.
Specialist Tomlinson.
They have to literally shovel dilithium into the fires of the warp core.
They were shoveling dilithium.
We work hard, but we play hard too.
This is from that Simpsons episode.
That is from that Simpsons episode.
It's camp. So the suggestion, they went with Styles' suggestion. They blanket the area with shots. They hit the ship, but at the cost of the phasers, which are now overloaded on the Enterprise.
Okay.
The Romulans use this chance to shoot them with a plasma blast. Kirk sits down like a boss.
Ball?
Kirk sits down like a boss at that point. He all like falls back in his chair in some awesome pose.
Yeah.
And he's like, it's overtaking them, even though they went into an emergency warp, but it's overtaking them. 10 seconds. Kirk goes 10 seconds to hit. It's going to hit us in 10 seconds. It took longer than 10 seconds, by the way. I counted. They didn't have phasers. They couldn't get phasers back. So they didn't know what to do. So they were just running. But they found out he was ranged. So they were able to run until it was impotent. The plasma blast went impotent because they managed to outrun it. The phasers, though, on the Enterprise are now back online. The Enterprise pulls the mirroring move again. They pull it again. They pull the mirroring move again, trying to double outthink the Romulans. They wouldn't try that again, after all. It's not clear if the commander thinks it's a reflection of the Enterprise, or if they think it's. It's hard. There's a lot of confusion. There's general confusion on the Romulan side.
I agree that there is a lot of confusion.
No, there's a lot of. What am I saying? That's not clear.
No. You're doing a great job. It's on me. I'm just enraptured with
He's just not there yet.
Look, okay. So what the folks at home can't see is that as Dan is, doing an excellent job recounting every aspect of this episode.
Told you it's longer than I thought it would be.
He is flailing his arms around and gesticulating in a mesmerizing way.
Yeah.
It's very hard to pay attention to the words coming out of your mouth.
Okay, I'll try to.
No, I do not.
I'm bewildered.
I'm a hand talker as well.
Okay.
So I know how important that can be. I'm doing it right now. I'm making all sorts of motions, but you've got a laptop that you're staring at, and I'm just staring at you, enraptured. So, Anyway,
I'm mesmerizing.
Yeah.
That's good to know. So it's not clear if the commander thinks it's a reflection or the Enterprise at this point, even though the Enterprise pulls the mirroring move again. There's general confusion on the Romulan ship over if it's the Enterprise or it's the mirror.
They don't use generals. They have Centurions and Praetors.
Yeah, I know. That's kind of awesome.
Commanders and sub-commanders.
Centurions.
I'm General Confusion.
I'm General Disarray.
That's a South Park reference.
Yes. So the Enterprise,
Simpsons, South Park,
Private Parts.
So while this reflection
that's a Howard Stern reference.
So while they go back to the mirroring mode, the Enterprise is now getting closer and closer to the neutral zone. The concern is that if they do so, the Romulan I guess the concern is that if they go into the neutral zone, the Romulan ship can start laying blame on the Enterprise for the war, even though that seems unlikely. I mean, it's clear that the Romulans were the aggressors, but they still
got a war.
They still so they just didn't want to risk it. So the concern. So Romulan ship has two great weapons that both have tons of power. Like I mentioned, they have the cloaking and the Romulan plasma ball. They can't do both. So Kirk takes advantage of this because you can't fire both because you have the cloaking on. You fire the plasma ball and
like an intense game of checkers.
You see the ship and it uses up all your energy.
I don't think they've ever had, for most of the Star Trek timeline, for lack of a better word, the story. You can never shoot while you're cloaked, right?
Right. I think sometime in the future
that's always the
Star Trek
limitation.
6. That was one of the special things they could shoot while they were cloaked.
Oh,
right.
Fuck!
But that's when they found the exhaust of the missiles.
Yes.
So I'm getting.
And it never came up ever again.
Yeah,
neither aspect of that plot ever came up ever again.
True.
I mean, that happened a lot in Star Trek, where some amazing shit would go down to solve the episode, and they just never took advantage of it later. But that's fine.
Just telling stories.
We're almost done here. So the Enterprise. So after
it's good because it's almost time to take a break.
Okay, good. So Kirk takes advantage of their Achilles heel, as he puts it. The Enterprise shoots a lucky shot, and it hits.
Achilles was Greek, though, right?
Totally.
And the Romulans are all Roman.
Yeah. So
Romulus and Remus, like the Wolf
and it
brothers.
wasn't. I mean,
okay,
that was pretty planned out. Shooting patterns. I mean,
were they?
They were. I mean, they were thinking. I mean, there was a certain bit of luck involved.
Well, they mentioned
it was a tricky thing to do, but it was totally they shot.
They rolled the dice.
It was a good grouping of blasts.
It was a good grouping of blasts. That is true. And they rolled the dice and they played the odds and they won. So the Enterprise is like the Greek and the Romulans are like the Romans, according to Patrick. So
that's not what I was.
Because Kirk said Achilles heel. It's in the script. So the Enterprise shoots a lucky shot and hits. At this point, the Enterprise pursues into the neutral zone despite it being dangerous. There's just no choice. Romulan ship, now we're back at the Romulan ship. The Romulan commander realizes Kirk is trying to rope-a-dope, trying to, make him fire to waste energy. Yeah. He figures it out. He's like, oh shit. So what the Romulan commander does is he jettisons debris and the body of the Centurion, to make them think it blew up, I think. But Spock,
for like a second.
Yeah, but Spock...
And it worked.
It worked.
Well, Spock knew better. He said there wasn't enough mass.
It didn't matter because it worked long enough for them to lose
in a game of seconds. Yeah, right. And so so that
it was a temporarily effective gambit.
Yeah, and so Kirk. This is when Kirk says "sensor." But then this is the weird part. This is where things get a little wacky. I'm not sure what's going on. You think you might know what's coming up. Spock accidentally hits some kind of some button
thing
that sets off this spiral blinky that the Romans
they were all
can
trying to be
hear.
super quiet. These are the Romans.
The Romulans.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting thing. And again,
did they hear the alarm, or did the alarm represent something that the
how can you hear stuff in space?
Okay. So here's
does the alarm mean that they heard the sensors go make a funny noise, or is it the alarm itself that they heard?
So what we have to do, we have to have an allowance here.
I'm confused.
There is a literary allowance because what they've done is they have made a submarine television. This is like a submarine movie.
Right.
And
where you can hear stuff.
In submarines, they have to do that thing like in Hunt for Red October where they have to be all super quiet because you drop a fucking drop a wrench on the thing and the enemy sub can totally hear it.
Because water like superconducts sound.
And because their whole sensors are all sonar, they're all sound-based sensors, right? So that's...
What's that other submarine movie with...
Das Boot?
Yeah, there's that one.
Crimson Tide.
There's that one.
There's Yellow Submarine.
There's the McConaughey.
Yellow Submarine.
What about the McHale's Navy or something? What was that one with Fraser in it?
Was that a submarine? Wasn't that just a battleship or something?
That was called.
It wasn't. Was it McHale's Navy?
No, anyway. It wasn't called McHale's Navy, but it was called like up Periscope or something.
Down Periscope.
You're
so close.
Yeah, all right. So close. But so that's the deal. Is it's a submarine movie, and so that's a conceit.
Right.
That's a conceit from a submarine movie. And so they were using the trope, even though
it doesn't really.
It sort of doesn't work in space. I think
because no one can hear your
the headcanon you can say is I think along the lines you were suggesting, Dan. The headcanon that you can place in there, because they are in space, is that when Spock hit that, it was less the auditory signal, but it emanated some sort of sensor blast that they were able to
electromagnetic.
And that's a high,
like if a radar, if you blast radar out, somebody can see that there's radar blasting out.
That was a highly illogical mistake that Spock made.
He's half human. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, what are you gonna do? I mean, he fucking hits this button. It was his after all that work. Spock fucks it all up.
But it was sort of meant to feed into Stiles' bigotry because all of a sudden, like Spock must be a spy.
Yeah, that's a good point.
All right, what's next, Dan?
I'll say the Romulans at this point, because they hear the sound, they charge. Enterprise somehow hits them when they're charging.
Yeah, dude, they just turn around and blast.
Yeah, so that there was nothing crazy going on. They kind of just hit him. So the Romulan commander, realizing that they were out of power and the Enterprise just manages to keep its distance, just out of reach, and they're running out of powers, he goes for a desperate move. He refers to Spurk as a sorcerer. Spock and Kirk. Kirk as a sorcerer.
Yeah.
So the Romulans, what they do is they drop those old school 100-year-old nukes in with the debris with a proximity detector. So Spock goes, debris on our scanners.
Like in GoldenEye.
Yeah, like proximity mines in the complex or whatever, or the basement rather.
Proximity fuel.
Spock goes, debris on our scanners, same type as before, sir, except one metal-cased object.
Oh no.
At this point, Kirk is in a serious rush to fire at it for some reason, and does at a distance of less than 100 meters, causing a bunch of shit to go down. Uhura runs upwards as if she's falling. Why did he do that?
No, he figured out that they were launching a nuke.
Everybody always does these crazy moves to pretend when the ship's getting jostled.
I will say, as silly as
when the commander at the end
when
when
did some dance and she got splayed across the wall.
As silly as it often comes off, I was very impressed with both the camera work and the choreography on the Romulan ship. Not at the end when they self-destruct the ship, but when they just were getting hit by the Enterprise, I was like, whoa, that actually looked pretty intense. They were throwing themselves around.
It did.
All right.
So anyway, why I'm not clear why they hit the nuke on purpose like that.
Because they figured out it was a nuke.
But why would they hit it then? Why
it wouldn't hit
it wouldn't hit the ship and blow up the ship even worse.
Yeah.
They couldn't reverse thrusters or something?
I mean, yeah, I'm
No,
sure,
it was-
maybe you could
it
do
was,
something else.
you know, they
It
were
was basically a
acting
missile.
fast.
Yeah. Okay. Well, fine. Fair enough.
yeah.
Okay.
Allowances,
So-
literary allowances.
That's fine. It's fine. So at this point, the Romulans think they've won, and the Enterprise, thinking this, that they think that they play dead. The Romulan commander wants to go home.
And he doesn't trust Kirk because he's probably playing dead.
Yeah, exactly. The sub-commander or whatever they call it, he insists that they hunt them down. And he's all like, if you don't do it, then let me do it, sir. And at this point, it's like, what the fuck? Why would the Romulan commander let this schlubby officer dude take credit for killing the Enterprise if the commander was going to let it happen in the first place,
He's
right?
Birdman without the wings.
Like, he's like, okay, if you're not going to kill him, give me the glory of it. It's like, oh, no, dude, if we're going to kill him, I'm going to take the credit.
Yeah,
Otherwise, we're
he's
not going to
the
fucking kill him.
commander.
Yeah, what a fucking asshole. So
Mark Leonard.
that dude is an idiot. So Kirk says fire. Styles almost fucks it all up. Spock saves the day.
There was the leak of the gas of the
Purple
coolants.
gas.
Purple. That was like the Joker.
The phaser
Purple
coolants.
gas.
From
Yeah,
the
Joker
Batman.
gas.
Joker gas from the original Batman.
Fabulous Joker products.
So we're almost there. Spock saves the day. They knock him out. There's some kind of bassoon music intensifies. There's
yes.
Romulan.
Dan keeps saying we're almost there. It's
We
like
are.
trying to achieve orgasm when you're on opiates.
That's it.
when you're on
That's it.
Or on, Zoloft or something like that.
Zoloft, or when you're like don't have to go that bad. Okay, so
Gross.
so they fuck up the
That's
ship.
enough already.
So the Romulan ship, they do the self-destruct mechanism thing. Boom. The Romulan commander runs off the screen going like, which is actually pretty comical,
Yes,
kind of
it
like
was
the way
very,
he runs.
very comical.
Yeah, what's also the view screen fades out instead of just like blipping out for some reason.
Yeah.
It does a dramatic fade out on the view screen when the shit's blowing up.
Well, they got good production value in the OS that runs the Enterprise. It's like, you know how like when you're listening to music on like iTunes or something, it does that good DJ fade from one song into the other.
Right.
It's the same principle at play
Yeah.
on the
I
Enterprise.
think you're right. And then what happens next? Tomlinson dies. Andrew's like, I'm cool. He was a prick anyway. And then the episode's over.
All right. So that was good. Thank you very much, Dan. It was advertised as a list of the quote unquote moves. I thought it was just going to be a list of the strategic moves.
That's what I was, kind of.
It was in fact a synopsis
Of the entire
episode.
Was it really?
Which is fine. A lot of
Yeah.
a lot of Star Trek
You know,
podcasts.
Sometimes
do
you can't separate the moves from the episode.
And I'm not gonna.
It was all moves.
And it never occurs to me to write a synopsis of the episode, but I was like, I should write down the moves. And it turns out,
It was all moves.
but it turns
they were
out,
just doing
and
moves
that's what
the whole
happened because
episode.
you like just saying the moves was enough. You had to see like, oh, they're reacting because of this. I didn't talk about all the Styles bigotry and stuff.
No,
like,
yeah.
I mean, there's a bunch of shit I didn't go into.
That we'll talk about.
I didn't
that
talk about a
in the
lot
next
of the
break.
specifics,
That-
but
that could be the
but
next
That was the whole one of the reasons it was a great episode because it was all moves. It was just moves everywhere.
Bunch of fucking moves,
So
man.
it's not a thing I'm going to make a habit of, but
It
that
was-
episode was just moves, man.
Yeah.
All right. So
It's cool, man. It's a cool episode.
been a particularly lengthy first break. I think we're all ready for our first break.
Champing. We're
let's
champing at the bits.
Move right along. We're gonna move
Don't
along
bury
home.
the lead.
Move along home to the break.
Move
So,
along.
right now is break. When we get back from break, more Star Trek TOS Balance of Terror. We will be right back. And we're back.
Nuh-uh.
We should start doing commercials.
It's got Star Trek. Yeah, well, we can insert them where the breaks
We
go.
do commercials for Pernicious.
Pernicious Ale or Pernicious, that's a beer. It's an
Yes.
IPA.
I haven't been drinking any energy drinks for the past few months. I kind of gave them
Oh,
up.
that's good.
Yeah. I mean, more power to you.
I've
Your
been
stomach
drinking.
is probably happy.
Yeah, I've been
I-
drinking
I-
Coke Zeros and these bubbly or not hard seltzer. Caffeinated seltzer is what I meant
Yeah,
to say.
those are good.
For our British listeners, other sodas are available. Just to meet the British
They call them
broadcasting
fizzy
standards,
drinks,
you
I
know.
believe.
What?
If in British broadcasting, if you mention a product,
right.
it's
you have
okay to
mention
mention it, but you also have to mention that there. For example, you might mention a McDonald's Big Mac.
Oh, I see.
and then you could say
but
there are other fast food restaurants that
not-
serve hamburgers.
We're
are
not
available.
singling
Rules are
out this
funny.
one business.
We are not
Yeah.
showing any preference to either Pernicious IPA beer or Coca-Cola
Or bubbly.
the bubbly brand.
That's not even one of the.
Flavored
That's not even
soda
a
waters.
caffeinated one. That's a plain one.
What? It's bubbly. Aren't they all caffeinated?
No, only the bubbly buzz is.
Oh, fuck.
That's just a grapefruit.
Man,
Oh, what a ripoff.
And the bubbly buzzes are funny hybrid flavors with like pears.
Well,
and-
thanks for educating me,
the
Jesse.
modern world is some fucked up shit. that we
Jesse
have to deal
educated me. Jesse claims that the British people call them fizzy drinks.
with. They may.
oh, if you get like what we call a fountain drink.
Okay.
Like if you go to a restaurant.
We call them a fountain.
and they-
Well,
like,
we
okay,
might. I don't
okay,
know.
and it's only at like Nando's where they have the fountain where you can like fill your own drink, but they don't call it a fountain drink. They call it a fizzy drink. Because I asked like, yeah, give me the fountain drink, and they were like, what?
I dated a girl.
The fizzy drink.
I dated a girl who called it pop. Pop.
Oh, right.
Pop.
Yeah, that
and it's
was-
very common. It's pretty
Some people
common.
call
She
it
was
pop,
from the
some
she
people
was
call
from
it
the
soda.
interior of the
But
continent.
it wasn't until my brother moved to Oklahoma that I learned that some people call all soda Coke.
Yeah.
And you go, I like
Oh,
it's like
right,
and,
Atlanta,
and,
it's
and you
like
go to this restaurant, you go, they go, what do you want to drink? You go, like, I want a Coke, and they're like, do you want a Sprite Coke or a
Some people
or a
call
Pepsi
it a
Coke
sody.
or whatever?
Give me a
Just-
sody.
Just a quick production.
Some people
note.
say soda pop,
Sody pop.
Just a quick production note. We have mentioned these anecdotes multiple times.
but not everyone's heard
I'm
of
getting
all
to
of
some
them.
serious
That's true.
deja
That's part of the
vu.
beauty of this kind of this format
yeah.
is that we're allowed to repeat ourselves from time to time.
from time
It's,
to time.
you know,
All
it's,
right.
it's a bit of middle age.
Yeah, that too.
Dementia.
Early onset. Okay. Balance of terror. So
Back to the.
Why is it called Balance of Terror anyway?
I was frightened.
that's a good question, and I think there are multiple potential answers to that question. Terror in this case, probably referring to the terror of war, which is a good segue into
And the balance because it's both sides.
the sort of anti-war message. But there is a generic anti-war message here, and not necessarily a pacifist message. Although you could pull some of that out from this as well, given the Federation's position on how much they're willing to let the Romulans break the treaty before actually responding with a full-scale war type situation. But it's anti-war, but it's also anti-hereditary revenge, right? There's the whole, like, even though it's not a big part of the story, like they make a big deal with Styles. Styles' whole thing when he begins, even before the Spock business, is he's talking about he had these ancestors who died in the war with the Romulans, and Kirk has to give him that whole speech about it was their war, it's not yours.
They make a rather big point of that in the Strange New Worlds version.
Yeah,
also,
the idea
about,
that
like this is our grandfather's war or something.
that you haven't dealt with these people in 100 years. There was a terrible war. Everyone agrees it was terrible, but you don't know the situation now. And even if you're concerned about war, there's a lot you don't know. And in your mind, your motivation shouldn't be some people I didn't even know in my family died, and because of that, I now want to murder these people.
Right.
That's not cool.
Not cool.
From Kirk's perspective, from Star Trek writer, TOS writer perspective.
It's not cool from our perspective.
But there's another layer.
Is it cool from your perspective?
Yeah, Dan, is it cool from your perspective to murder people because they killed family members a few generations back? What do you think, Dan? Is that cool?
Oh, man.
I've really thought about it a lot just now, and I've decided it's not cool.
We can make direct comparisons to the things that the people writing the episode would have been much more familiar with than we are at this point in time, in terms of the temporal location, the temporal. They're very close in time to World War II, World War I.
Right.
Chronological proximity?
Yes, chronological proximity. That's better. The
Very destructive
temporal chronological
conflicts.
Yeah, and
in the 60s, you got some Vietnam business happening.
And so these messages, and Vietnam was going on at the time.
This is a great example of an episode where it really shows how Star Trek is commenting on sort of current events and like making but it's doing it in such a way where it's not throwing it in your face.
Yes. It's actually using the sci-fi to get the message across,
right,
especially to people who might not otherwise want to receive that message.
Right. So like
by illustrating it with a different set of events.
And it's easy to watch that episode and not think about that, but then when you think about it, it's very obviously there.
Yeah. But the other thing that's an undercurrent here that I think is less often discussed is the idea of sort of institutional inertia or cultural inertia, and the hereditary revenge thing is a little bit of that. But the main point, I think, of Mark Leonard's character, the Romulan commander.
He looks enchanting as the Romulan
he's
commander.
Wonderful.
Something about him is just I just can't stop looking at him.
And for for newbies to Star Trek, Mark Leonard would later become famous for playing Spock's father, starting in season 2 of TOS, and he played it for many years after that.
Even in TNG,
he was that good as the Romulan commander.
But the Romulan commander character, he talks about with the Centurion, he laments the idea of starting up a new war. And as a sidebar, by the way, we can talk
as a cyborg.
No, as a
by
cyborg,
the way, as a cyborg,
he's talking about how much war they've already dealt with. But we know they haven't been fighting the Federation. So I'd be interested to hear more about learn more about who the Romulans were fighting. Presumably they were an empire. Maybe they were conquering planets or defending planets. But he was talking about
those Klingons at some point.
He spent his whole life fighting, so they're fighting somebody. Yeah. But regardless, he is playing that character, which is again is a somewhat tropey character, but not a bad way, of the seasoned, experienced warrior who is not interested in going to war. He's seen war, so he doesn't want to go to war.
He knows what it is.
Unlike
he knows what it's good for.
Unlike the younger folks who are bloodthirsty and they're like, I want to go make my bones by going and killing some Federation peeps
because they haven't done it yet.
Right?
He's young and have that kind of reckless ambition.
Yeah, but the institutional inertia, the institutional factor here is he talks about how here's a character who does not want to start a war for multiple reasons, but he's not interested in doing it. But he says he's also a creature of duty.
They say duty in the episode.
Yes,
so
duty.
So there's no mistake in it.
And that is mirrored in Kirk and others on the Enterprise. The writers are portraying the concept of duty as important.
Thank you.
Right? So that like with the whole Styles thing and everything, that it's important to them that the concept of duty exists. That is revered in this conception of Star Trek, right? This sort of proto-neoliberal version of Star Trek.
And the fact that he was like, we're what does he say? We're a species of what does he say at the end? We're of duty, of something of duty. We are creatures of duty.
Creatures of duty.
We are creatures of duty. And so when they throw that in there, it kind of also gives you a little bit of empathy, being like, okay, this is how their whole culture is built up.
Well, and we are.
So just because someone's attacking your shit, yeah, it's fucked up and terrible. But there's a different perspective, I guess.
But I think my point is that in the context of the 60s in particular, my guess is that we're meant to read this as part of why we're sympathetic is because we are supposed to also agree that we're supposed to respect the idea of duty to the end and duty to your cause.
That's what I'm saying.
It's like the whole Confederacy nonsense, it's like, they were just doing that's a complex argument, the whole thing. But I think these days the opinions would be different.
Right, but that's what I was basically trying to say.
I'm adding on to that by saying I think what's interesting, I think part of what this story is trying to tell us is that you have characters, both Kirk and the Romulan commander, neither of them want to start a war. Neither of them want to be in a war. Yet both of them, bound by duty, have to go through the motions that could potentially end up leading to war. And that's, for me, part of the interesting thing is that even when the participants are not interested in starting the war, the institutions within which they are embedded drive them towards that action regardless.
And that's what allows us to have some empathy for the Romulans in that sense, because, it's not just them. They're doing their responsible thing as part of their culture. They're, Now your opinion on what that actually means in the end, that's a different discussion, but it does sort of make them, it humanizes them, or our understanding of, empathizes. We can empathize with that.
The justification for like the escalation of hostilities in Vietnam was all based on like the Gulf of Tonkin situation, which was some shady shit that went down between a couple of ships.
Yeah.
So this is like this, but it happened differently, so there wasn't an escalation.
And I think the other thing that factors in that relates to Vietnam is, although I think it's true in a number of cases, Vietnam was another example of institutions just sort of inexorably pushing things towards more and more war and violence because they were like, okay, the French couldn't handle this. Okay, we'll send a few thousand people over. Oh, a few thousand people isn't working. Let's send 50,000 more. Okay, now
it's
let's
a continuation of the Cold War, which is a continuation of World War II, which is just.
But all of it is about the institutional decision making, not generals and admirals and other people making decisions that they knew would not work because they were the decisions they were told to make by the system.
Right. Yeah.
That's what you know, right?
Yeah.
The system says, "Oh, we have to win this war, so let's send another 500,000 people over. Let's napalm the whole forest because we have to win the war because that's what the system says."
That's how the math works out.
As opposed to the strategic thing, which might have been like, "Oh, you know what? Let's actually pull out and do something different." Right. So, I mean, go look up the various the hundreds of documentaries that you can look into about this. But anyways, I thought that was maybe a less often appreciated and more subtle anti-war, anti-institution, and not anti-institution as in you shouldn't have institutions, but just sort of critiquing the idea of culture and institutions sort of constraining your decision-making in ways that lead to terrible disaster. Mm-hmm. And that is a very contemporary message. It is still valid today, even though it's in a slightly different context.
That's unfortunately that is one of them evergreen messages.
Yeah,
and it's one of those sad.
At least for the past,
because even though
it's
directly comparable to the Vietnam War, it can be applied over and over
to
again.
the Iraq War,
and
the Iraq War, the
Afghanistan War, all sorts of things, and the frustration, of course, I think I'm sure the writers of Star Trek who shared this frustration is people can see it happening, and they are saying like, "Hey, wait a second." Don't you see what's happening? And everyone's
do you see, Captain?
Do you see? And then I thought you were doing like Event Horizon or something.
Oh no, that was Henson.
Yes, Hammer
Henson, who is fucked up. He was supposed to look
Hanson,
whatever.
Hanson.
He was supposed to look all fucked up in that scene, but he just looked really drunk, like his eyes
drunk and dirty.
Yeah,
he was no Cisco.
His eye was all squinty. He's like, I'm gonna blow up, and that's what I thought of him. Anyways, sorry to interrupt.
No,
you said, "Do you see?" Then I interrupted you.
No, I was just riffing along with you.
Riffing along with you. Spock said that these old ships, that among other things, there were no quarter in these old ships.
No quarter, baby.
So in the
old war.
Yeah,
there was
the old war,
no quarter.
not no quarters.
It means you didn't take prisoners. Yeah, you killed them.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. I didn't know. I didn't know.
Colloquial.
I didn't know because I noticed he didn't say quarters.
But
he said no
Jesse
quarter.
has just educated you yet again.
Jesse's been educating me several times.
There's that Led Zeppelin song.
Like, you just got educated. What Led Zeppelin song? What?
There's a Led Zeppelin song. No.
What called "You Got Educated"?
It's called No Quarter.
How about that song that's like "No shelter, have no shelter, no shelter"?
I don't believe that's a Led Zeppelin song.
All right, how about this? Let's talk about the Styles stuff in a little bit more detail. The racism against Spock. Now there's a lot that's really great about this, but there's also some things that I think we can critique with our modern eyeballs. Giving all the credit to the people at the time, but just things that we might look at a little bit differently these days. So there is this very famous line from Kirk when he's getting mad at Styles because Styles is being a fucking shithead.
Yeah.
And he says, leave any bigotry in your quarters. There's no room for it on the bridge.
Yes.
Now, that is a poetic line. It is a great line in this episode. In the context of this episode, it has a great deal of impact. However, I like the line. I respect the line. I think it's a good line.
I love the line. It's a nice line. It's good. You buy the line, you get
I
the
think
line.
people should enjoy it. It is very clearly progressive for the time. They were trying to make a point.
From our kind of perspective, that doesn't really.
The problem is I think nowadays we look back on it, we'd say that idea is a nice idea. It's kind of your typically nice white liberal idea, which is like, oh, it sounds nice. Except now we would consider it. I would argue
we know that doesn't work.
It's naive. It's naive to think somebody can actually not have their biases influence their professional activities to some degree.
But I mean, that's one of the points of the Roddenberry future, though, right?
Because that was the thing. Because everybody forgot they were racist until we had a black president, and then everybody remembered.
And then they remembered. They're like, oh shit.
Yeah. They said it was over, but then they remembered.
Like, okay, now we're not paying taxes.
But I thought,
I'm a sovereign citizen.
Isn't the Roddenberry future though? Is that kind of
Well, that's where he got to in TNG because he in Roddenberry's opinion, as I recall, he thought it got away from him a little bit on TOS because he had to make it a little bit more cowboyish.
Wasn't there something where Roddenberry, according to one of the documentaries I saw, where Roddenberry, he didn't want strife among the crew?
Yeah. So in TNG,
that was a TNG thing, because there was definitely strife among the crew in this episode.
Yeah, and in early TNG, basically the vast majority of the drama is generated by external inputs, nebulae, wormholes, Q, other
crystalline entity.
Yes,
crystalline entity is going to get us the Gormagander. No, that's not
Gormagander.
That's not TNG.
Gormagander.
But in TOS they still have some of this internal drama, which is good. It's better. Once TNG started introducing more interpersonal drama, and interpersonal drama does not have to be somebody's racist. It just there's lots of other forms of interpersonal drama. But this does work very well. But I thought it's important to point out that from a modern perspective, we'd consider it naive to be like, oh yeah, you can be totally racist in your room looking at Nazi posters and whatever.
Right.
But as long as you're cool when you're being a police officer. No, sorry.
That doesn't work.
Clearly doesn't work, right? So that's one thing it's nice, but it's a bit naive.
As long as you're cool as a state senator. It doesn't work.
One thing about that line that I wanted to go on a small tangent over, in that there was an important word he said in that line, and that was when Styles was being a shithead, Kirk goes, well, here's one thing you can be sure of, mister.
Yeah.
Leave any bigotry in your quarters. Mister. That happened 2 other times. Yeah. Once when Robert to Angela, he goes, well, meanwhile, temporarily, at least, I am still your superior officer. So get with it, mister. Yeah. And then Styles at one point goes...
as a superior officer, you can refer to your underlings as mister.
It just sounds funny. It just sounds funny because they're all like, mister. Yeah. I just think it's funny.
Mr. And then Crusher.
Styles goes, these are Romulans. You run away from them and you guarantee war. They'll be back. Not just one ship, but with everything they've got. You know that, Mr. Science Officer. And then he goes, blah, blah, blah. You're the expert that always left out one point. Why? I'm very interested in why. And then Kirk says, sit down, mister.
This is feeling very familiar. Just earlier in the podcast.
No, it's because all the times he said mister. He said there was twice.
I agree. It was funny. He said it a lot.
In South Park, they did a Mr. Scientist. It sounded just like
Mr. Scientist.
No, sit down, mister.
So here's the other problem I had with it. And again, it's not a problem in the context of the show. It's a problem that is introduced by the lived experience since this show has aired, and the stuff we know more about in the quest for civil rights, which is still ongoing, which is that this plot also relies on that classic and I think really overused trope of the racist person, the prejudiced person is a piece of shit prejudiced person until a member of that group saves their life. And now they're like, oh, I was stupid to be racist. Right. I'm no longer racist.
Right.
Now, here's the problem with that. There's a couple problems with that.
I repented and I am saved.
The two major problems I have with that trope are, first of all, that it puts the onus on the person suffering from the prejudice to be a hero, right? And risk their life. And only in that context can they overcome racism. Yeah. It's when you don't think about it, it's like, no, it's fucked up. It's fucked up to say like, yes, we can help people by not be racist by having traditionally marginalized groups going around being fucking superheroes. Like that's the solution to racism.
Right, that'll fix it.
That's a horrible concept, right? I know that's not what was intended, but again, best intentions do not mean that people do not have their own biases that affect them. And the other thing is about that same trope is that we know, like, it would be nice to think if that were true. It was like, oh, this guy saved my life. This pointy-eared Vulcan saved my life. So now I'm not racist against pointy-eared Vulcans. That would be nice if that was how it worked in reality, but as we've seen quite recently, like with COVID and some other things, what actually happens if a traditionally marginalized person saves the oppressor's life, what actually happens is the oppressor either refuses the help and is like, fuck you, I don't want you to treat me, because you're a gross alien doctor. I won't let you treat me. I won't let you say, I would rather die than get a blood transfusion from you. I'd rather die than have you do surgery on me. And that's really what we normally would see happening, right? The best case scenario is, well, you're one of the good ones. It's not that they stop being racist. They're just like, oh, I'm not going to be racist to you in particular because you saved my life. But I'm going to be racist to the rest of you motherfuckers. Sadly,
you're on the Supreme Court.
That is more often what we see in real life than this trope. And so that's why I do think this trope, it can be somewhat damaging for those two reasons.
Spock shut him down, though, which actually happens in a lot of these kinds of same situations where he goes like, I saved a trained navigator so he could return to duty. I am capable of no other feelings. Basically, he was doing the Spock version of saying like, I didn't do it for you, motherfucker. Yeah. I did it for the ship.
Yeah. He was like, you're a fucking piece of shit.
Yeah.
Styles, more like Piles.
Oh, duty.
Yes.
Go, get on duty, you pile of duty. Get on duty, you pile of duty.
Oh, I was thinking like hemorrhoidal piles.
Yeah. What? Is that what they refer to hemorrhoids as piles?
Yeah.
Really? I've never heard that.
Well, in some circles. Maybe you're just not hanging out with the right people.
I think you just made it up.
I did not make that up.
You just made it up right now.
All right. Anything else on the Styles racing? so we'll take another break shortly. But
I'm ready.
I did want to before we take our next break, I did want to briefly talk about just a little bit more about the Romulan commander and Romulan motivations. It's not necessary for this story, but both in this story and in the last week's story, we don't get a real good idea of what the motivations are. I know on the surface they're kind of testing the Federation out and they're trying to see if they're weak enough and then we can start war. I understand that basic level, but I don't know. I'm just a little bit more, it's not a flaw in the episode. It's now something I'm curious about. I'm reminded from last week's episode and this week's episode, I'm reminded that there's so much we don't know that happened during this 100 years with the Romulans that we've never gone back to find out. So we're very familiar with Romulans kind of from here on out, from Balance on Terror on out. They become regular characters in TNG and Deep Space Nine in particular. They're like all over the place, right? Yeah. So we know a lot about how Romulan society works sort of in the future, but
Picard.
I want to know who were the Romulans fighting with this whole time? What are kind of their empire philosophies?
There is the stuff we know. There's something happened with them and the Klingons. They hate each other.
But then periodically they'll like
that
help each other
sometime
out.
In the past, I guess.
For example, and I don't know how much we can infer from this, but of course they set the Romulans up as this whole Roman thing, right? With Romulus and Remus and all this stuff.
Romulus and Remus.
Are we meant to think they're like the Roman Empire? Did they operate like the Roman Empire? And if they did, at what stage of the Roman Empire are they? Are they early Roman Empire? How do they treat their vassal states?
Because you do have the sense, at least with this episode, with their ranks, because they have centurions and there's a praetor and there's the praetor, some vaguely Roman names.
The praetor is basically like the emperor.
Weren't the centurions in Age of Mythologies? They were some kind of robot centurions, weren't they? Weren't they some kind of crazy Age of Was it Age of Empires or Age of Mythologies? Weren't there centurions?
In Age of Empires, yeah, but they weren't robots.
I thought there was like
you could put in a cheat code and get the robot car that shot lasers.
I guess I was thinking of the automatons or something.
Automatons. All right, I don't know if you guys had any idea. I mean, there's not much any ideas beyond that, but I just wanted to mark down on the record that I would be cool with learning more Romulan lore.
Yeah, I mean, we have learned some. It's like we've learned about they're
so stingy with the Romulan lore.
We learned about
you get more Romulan lore in like Picard than like anything else.
Yeah, we learned the Quat Malat.
But that's all the later stuff. I think that's great. I love all that, but that just makes me want to kind of see some stories like in like even like the Enterprise period, but like from the Romulan side. That's where I wish they were doing a little bit more either anthology style or more short treks.
Yeah, that would be a good idea to have some more like. Maybe have a season of each different species or something like that.
And with the volume, because previously the problem with anthology stuff, the anthology idea has been around for a while, and Discovery was initially envisioned as being an anthology series, sort of like a season by season anthology series.
What, like switching characters every season?
Yeah, like switching whole time frames and everything. But the problem has always been, and I'm sure there's still factors. I'm sure there's still factors in, but the problem has always been it's a production cost, right? Because you have to build sets and this, that, and the other.
I thought it was a construction cost.
You gotta pay people.
Was it a production or a construction cost?
But with the volume,
he was like, I'm not even gonna care about that.
But with the volume, special effects and stuff, they have a lot more flexibility.
Patrick's got no time to dilly dally tonight.
I'm just trying to, I just
got
think
a podcast, man.
we got a podcast to put out. I think that we are now at the state of technology and the state of success of the Star Trek franchise. They're making shitloads of money off of all these shows. That's something they maybe should consider justifying. And it doesn't need to be a 10-episode season. I'd be cool with like either a TV movie style thing or like a 4-episode
like what they do in
miniseries.
Disney Plus with the Marvel
do like
Star
6
Wars
episodes.
series.
And just do like, okay, here's
like
some,
with like the Obi-Wan or whatever.
yeah,
you know?
here's some Romulan stuff, here's some Klingon stuff, here's some pirate shit, and you can even make it like all sort of connect up over
hold
time.
your tongue and say, I was born on a pirate ship.
I mean, should I do that?
Yeah.
All right. I was born on a pirate ship. I don't get it. Is it funny?
Yeah, it is funny. You said it. You said it.
You said something funny.
You did it.
All right. Anything else on that? Otherwise,
well, I was.
All right.
I was going to say about Styles. Back to Styles. I wasn't sure. He was sort of the hero, but not really, because he was supposed to blow this shit up, but somehow he fucked it all up. So how did he let the Joker gas get in? The phaser coolant. How did he do? How did he let all that phaser coolant in? He fucked it up, and he
just didn't.
And after he told Spock, he was like, "I think I can handle this, Spock. I got this under control."
Fuck off, Spock.
Didn't do anything. I don't know what they didn't have any procedure to handle the phaser.
He should have pushed one of those buttons that set off an alarm. Why can't you just push one of those buttons? All right.
You could have called. He was just down the hall. He says, "Hey, Spock, come back."
Just as long as he doesn't press the Spyro blinky button that alerts the Romulans.
All right. So we don't want to make our audience think that we're going to go on forever. So we have to take a break, and we'll do our final break.
We're going to try to wrap it up.
We're going to finish on time.
Holy shit.
We're going to talk about odds and ends and a few other little bits and pieces. Yeah. Okay. Break time is now, and then we'll be back.
Can we have orange slices and Kool-Aid?
Oh,
whatever you want.
I hope so.
All right. We'll be right back. We're back.
There was something.
I don't know about Kool-Aid. I'll take the orange slice.
I mean, and this is probably just due to like the nature of the production.
Did you say doo-doo?
This is due to the nature of the production capabilities of the show, but
the doo-doo nature?
There was something
Doo-doo Nation.
I like the minimalistic feel we sort of get about all the shit being destroyed around him and all this stuff.
Yeah.
We see a few things here and there. It's cool in Strange New Worlds to see all this, all the stuff.
Like here, we don't actually see the outposts. We only see the view screen.
Yeah, we don't even see like a picture of like them existing at all. Yeah, we just see.
You don't see the Romulan ship explode. It just sort of, like you said, it sort of fades into existence.
It's like
there's something kind of neat.
It's a play-by-mail role-playing game.
It's play-by-mail. Is that like D&D
or like a text-based computer game?
So play-by-mail is where you have to be always sitting next to an older gentleman.
Yes, right. Of course, play-by-mail. So I like.
He's not involved, but he needs to be in close proximity.
There's something to be enjoyed by both. Like
it tells you how to mail things,
like seeing everything, but also the minimalistic sort of makes it feel more like a detective story or something like that.
Okay.
When those ships were firing, all those. There was parts of it that actually reminded me of TAS in a way, which is appropriate because TAS was supposed to remind you of TOS. When the Enterprise was firing those wild shots, and the ship was shaking around, the Romulans were shaking around. Yeah, it looked like the fucking TAS episode. Yeah, it's tight.
It was very tight.
Because they would still, it was the same pattern that each phaser bank shot, and it was reminiscent of the recycling of scenes that they used in TAS.
Maybe it's more that just because it recycled.
Totally.
The first galactic phaser bank.
The first galactic phaser bank. There were some weird looks given in this episode when they zoom in on Spock and he does his eyebrows go to the ceiling. He like all like nods his head around and does this. He like they linger on his face. He's making this weird
Sassy
look.
Spock.
And then Bones says that weird thing about like when he's like, "Don't destroy the one named Kirk," which is a whole weird line altogether.
It was a little bit weird.
But then but he's like licking his lips and doing all this weird shit with his face after he says
he's also vastly underestimating by orders of magnitude the number of stars and galaxies.
Oh right, yeah.
But, what are you going to do? 1966.
He's a human.
They didn't have Hubble telescope. They didn't have the old James Webb
They didn't have the Webb
telescope. slurping up all that light, slurping up all that infrared light. Oh, it's so all those galaxies. Those galaxies have been redshifted. You can't believe how much they've been redshifted. You can't see them with the regular shit. You gotta get the special shit because they've been redshifted so much.
Science.
You gotta reverse redshift them. You gotta put a little blue in that shit.
So, are there any other things, or do you want to do odds and ends, or what?
Well, basically, we can.
I thought we were at odds.
This is all odds and ends. One thing I thought was it.
You did thought. You did thought. You said a weird thing.
I did thought it was interesting that. See, I did it on purpose.
Did you?
I did thought it was interesting that in Star Trek in general, particularly TOS.
What was that you said? Particularly.
Particularly. That's a word, right? Particularly?
Sure.
Particularly. I'm saying it correctly.
Peculiar.
Particularly.
It's very peculiar.
TOS, but also TNG days. In most of their adventures, somebody dies. In Star Trek, almost every episode.
Oh, yeah.
Until in more recent Star
Red
Trek, that's
shirts.
actually less the case,
Yeah.
right? They've reduced that somewhat. But there was,
But
for
people
much
are
of Star
still
Trek.
people are still dying. though.
Now it's the red shirts or it's a guest star, whatever. There's very frequently in the course of the adventure, somebody dies. This is the sort of tacit, always existing, stakes, right? It's like, oh, the stakes are real. With
stakey
any
stakes.
victory comes with some sacrifice. That message is sort of always underneath in the undercurrent of the stories. It's just, but it also happens so often you start to ignore it. This episode calls it out by framing the episode with the near wedding between Martine and Tomlinson, and then at the end with Martine,
dude dies.
mourning Tomlinson who died. Although from the looks of it, Angela did not seem too put out.
Yeah, no, okay. Can I mention that real quick? Can I just mention that?
She was probably like, oh, I dodged a bullet.
Yeah, because during that whole
She's like, that Styles guy is pretty sexy.
during that whole exchange when he was like, happy wedding day almost, she's like, you won't get off my hook that easily, I'm gonna marry you, mister. Another word of mister. Battle or phaser weapons notwithstanding. And he goes, well, meanwhile, temporarily at least, I'm still your superior officer. So get with it, mister.
But he was only a specialist.
And she gave the smile of a person that is trying to hold back their annoyance.
I know.
Like when he said that to her, he's like,
and he all like reached over and pushed something on the.
yeah.
on
Do you
the
think he was?
I think he was turning off like the comm
Was
link
he
or something.
was he talking down to her, or was
He was talking
flirting, or
down
was he,
to her.
or were they trying to make it seem like he was flirting with her? Or
So,
were they,
Dan.
He was talking down to
no
her.
wonder she didn't give a fuck that he died at the end, because at the end
Exactly.
she was just like, oh, I'm fine, Captain, I don't give a shit.
Toxic,
And when Kirk entered the room in that scene, they played the sexy music when Kirk entered the room.
right?
You know, it was weird. And so she
Prima nocta.
so she dodged a bullet because this guy was talking shit to her during that exchange. But unless they meant to make it seem like he was flirting with her, but that's not how it came
Dan,
across.
I think the key thing to remember here is that generally speaking, not to generalize, but generally speaking, men are just pieces of shit.
Yeah.
We know this from personal experience.
You know this.
Because we are nominally men.
Yeah. Nominally.
We were born that way.
I totally agree with you calling out. Thanks for calling out that whole look she gave, because that was the look of all women in the 60s.
Yeah.
Being like, fuck.
I gotta put up with this shit.
It's like, okay, they let me have the job, but now they're treating me like shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was pretty funny. But yeah, that whole like the fact that they bookend the episode with that story of a new beginning cut short, and you immediately empathize with these people, and then the one dies and all this other stuff. So all joking aside, it does make you. It reminds you even more. It's like, okay, they won. They encountered danger and they worked together and they used their cleverness and wiles and skills and all that stuff to get through it. But people still die. In fact, in this case, it was only one motherfucker died in all this, and it was her almost husband.
Yeah, it was interesting that they took the time to you didn't really get to know these characters much, except for, like you said, they bookended this sort of scenario to try to raise the stakes a little bit.
Because they don't go to war with the Romulans until much later, right? Like that's more like a TNG thing.
Yeah, and it's never really like, well, yeah, there is in Deep Space Nine. There's some like war. It's always like on the bubble,
and
stuff.
I mean, and there's the whole Dominion,
and then the Dominion.
So,
that gets a little complicated. The galactopolitics.
So when the Romulan commander,
it's real.
when the Romulan commander, like, he knocked that schlub down a couple ranks.
Schlub.
Schlub commander.
Schlub commander, yes. Perfect. When he knocked him down 2 ranks, that's pretty hardcore, right?
It
like,
is,
just to knock
yeah.
someone. Can you just knock someone? I mean, in Romulan culture, I guess you can. But
Honestly, I thought
knock
that was
someone
nice.
down.
Yeah.
I think if you are on
if the offense is big enough.
if you're on a frigate in the Pacific Ocean in World War II and the order is for radio silence and you send out a fucking message, I think they're fucking putting a bullet in your brain.
Yeah.
And that's not exaggeration.
Yeah,
I think
and
that's what happens. I think you get a bullet in your fucking brain.
I think
Yeah,
you're
why did
shark
that-
You can
food.
argue whether or not that's appropriate, but that's what would happen.
Why
You're
wouldn't-
feeding the sharks.
Wait, and why wouldn't the committee or whatever he sent the letter to? Why wouldn't they come back and say, like, hey, don't fucking do that during wartime? Like, why did it had to take the commander to knock this guy down?
Well, and they give us hints here that are expanded upon in,
that he's
in later
got
Star
friends.
Trek. That that the Romulans are set up again, sort of Roman political style. That it's the rank is perhaps less important in some ways than who you know, and I mean that's true in a lot of contexts in our real world too. So I think that's why he did it. He was trying to curry favor with his powerful friends. He probably figured he could get away with it. Who knows? Maybe his powerful friends thought it was great that he sent that message. You know, in the Strange New Worlds version of the story, they did. Right?
Totally.
Right. All right. Other stuff.
that's this
What's the racist term for Romulans? Is it Rommies?
Ramis.
I can't recall them other than pointy eared or whatever. I can't remember
Ramis.
if they have a racist term for Romulans.
Romulan. So the Cardi Spoonheads.
Yeah, they have, which is the worst, by the way. I
Yeah,
always
that
feel
one
bad
is really. Yeah, I
saying
know.
it.
I do too.
It's fun saying spoonhead, but
it feels really bad.
It feels racist.
Yeah, it makes me feel sad.
It's just because it
very
sounds funny.
racist.
What I mean, Romulans are like wannabe Vulcans. I mean, I don't know.
Wannabe Vulcans. That would insult them.
Yeah, it would insult them.
If
right.
that's what you're going for.
Speaking of the Romulans, does the I don't know the answer to your question. If you come up with one, let me know. Oh, I'll answer another question I had. I was singing the song "No Shelter" earlier. That's from the movie Karate Kid. It was by band Broken Edge. So speaking of songs and Romulans, this episode opens up with the song "Long, Long Ago." If you listen, it's going like and that song's called "Long, Long Ago."
Who is
Really?
it by?
I think it's one of them traditional
Is
pieces.
it like one of those folk tunes?
I know it's in one of the Suzuki Method books.
That's interesting. I didn't pick up on that at all.
Yeah,
Long, Long
I don't know.
Ago.
I don't know who wrote that. Who did write that, Jesse?
I don't know that. I'm not familiar with that song.
You never
But
heard that
But
song?
it must be like one of those songs that they call traditional.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
it's
what
like
I
a
assume.
folk
Because
tune.
yeah,
I have a
But,
a
you know-
smartphone here. I can look it up.
but it was apt considering it was long, long ago that they last saw the Romulans.
That's
Although I
true.
don't know if they meant to do that, but it would. Be
I
a
wouldn't put
coincidence.
it past those clever folks.
And then Kirk all walks up to the things as Kirk here. He says it all sexy. He's like, Kirk here.
Kirk here.
Kirk here. I like some of the production. I always like looking at the Star Trek, the opening, the TOS. When you
Long,
see
long ago is a song by Marty Robbins.
okay, what year?
Marty Robbins.
I like the so some of the effects, like you had at the end
1833.
1830 is basically traditional.
You meant like medieval. You meant like green
No,
sleeves or something.
no, I didn't. No, I didn't. I knew it wasn't that old. That sounded like some kind of golden spike kind of shit. Like when they show the picture, the matte picture of stars, and you have like some of them are kind of moving in the background. That's the kind of Star Trek kind of sort of vibe. And then that map
It moves.
And then they had the map that had, what was the map? It had the Earth outpost neutral zone and the Romulan Star Empire. That map, it looked like it was made on construction paper.
It was.
But it had a blinking light. So was that a physical light on the map?
Yes.
Or was that a special effect on the film
And then
itself?
the
I'm sure that
Romulan
was a
worlds the home worlds were like
composite.
right on the inside of the shit, right? They were just right in that sector.
They were all right next to each other. Do you think they put like a flashlight behind the construction paper, or do you think they put something on the film?
I think they probably
was that part
had-
of the remaster?
I don't think it was part of the remaster. I do think they probably filmed a light bulb in a dark space moving, and then
I see, yeah.
they composited that on top of the thing. That would be my guess, based off of zero experience in the special effects arena.
Speaking of production, at the part where the
Yeah,
commander,
you were speaking of production. That's right.
I was, yeah. Speaking more of it, the commander goes when the commander goes, he's a sorcerer. That one referring to Kirk. The line is like, he reads the thoughts in my brain. But when I watched it, when he says thoughts in my brain, the only reason I know he said that was from the script and closed captioning, because that thoughts in my brain is completely obscured by an explosion. Like the mixing was not so great there. There was another time where something blew up and then it cut back to them, and it was like the music cut short, and it's like they didn't have the explosion of the music fade back into the scene, right? In another part. So there was a couple that happens in Star Trek from TOS from time to time.
But television in general.
Yeah, it's just they're a lot better nowadays with those kind of changeovers, you know.
I agree.
Yeah, but I mean that was a really bad mixing job when he says thoughts in my brain. That was really bad.
It was a trick. Probably it was
thoughts
just
in my
the
brain.
problem with TV production schedules, particularly back in the day.
Yes.
Is
they had like 30 episodes.
They film, they do the stuff, and then when they get to the editing room, they have what they have. They're not paying money to go back and fix stuff or re-record stuff. Or very rarely are they going to do that.
Everybody's popping pills.
And it's expensive though. You got to watch the film back, and you got to
back.
You can't watch back. You can't just like do whatever you want. Like every time you change something, it costs a bunch of money because you use some shit up.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Expensive.
Odds and ends.
There was lots of activity with Grace Lee Whitney, aka Yeoman Janice Rand.
Yeah.
Which was there was a weird scene. There was a whole weird scene where she was talking about
all she does is like take food orders. Is that the deal?
She gets scared and then nestles up right next to Kirk.
Right.
She's done that in a couple episodes.
So
she gets some coffee.
There was a weird scene when the plasma ball was coming down on him.
Yeah.
And Kirk's like, feed this to the space recorder and jettison immediately. Then Yeoman Rand comes up and says, Captain, should I continue log entry? And then Kirk just goes, Yeoman.
Yeah.
And then he pauses. He goes, affirmative.
Yes.
Continue log entry. I didn't know what he was going.
Was weird.
I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know if he was annoyed
I interpreted it as she was saying, we're about to be destroyed. Is there any point in me continuing
and he's just
doing this?
And he's just like,
yes.
Yes. Right. Yeah.
Yes.
But she gained rank, Yeoman.
Really?
Yeah.
Eventually, right? She was in Star Trek 3, I believe.
Okay.
I think she was a lieutenant or something at that point. I believe the actress didn't have quite a wonderful life for a while. I think she turned it around though. But
oh really? Does she had some personal issues?
I think later on.
I think the actor passed away recently in the past few years. It's been a few years.
According to IMDb, she is known for Star Trek 3, Woman in Cafeteria. In Star Trek 4, she's Commander Janice Rand. So from 3, she went from Woman in Cafeteria to 4, Commander Janice Rand.
Yeah.
Like some kind of
cafeteria.
Yeah. So anyway,
all right. Man. Any other odds and ends? Otherwise, we have a quick three question pop quiz.
Oh,
and then we can close out the episode.
The star dates. We're talking about random star dates. So at the beginning of the star date of this episode, it was 1709.2 at the beginning, and then like halfway or so or through, it's 1709.6. In Quality of Mercy, the star date is 1457.9. But hear me out. But at the beginning of the episode. At the beginning of this episode. Then later on, after they go to the time, the star date in Quality of Mercy is 1709.2, which is the star date at the beginning of this episode of A Balance of Terror. So they matched them up.
Right.
They might not mean shit, but at least they matched them up.
That's interesting.
That was not an accident.
That's good. I like.
And he would have jumped ahead in time.
Yeah. Okay.
The table of comets. What that book, Table of Comets? That for some reason they had this book.
There was a book.
There was a book sitting on the table that was.
Oh, really? I didn't notice that.
Yeah, there was just this book, and at one point, like
it was called Table of Comets,
and Kirk pushed it back.
Yeah, Kirk. Yeah, they're talking about the comet and the going through the comet trail, and Kirk like hands Spock the big book of Table of Comets, which is Galaxy Quadrant, blah blah blah.
Not to be confused with the Table of Contents.
Yeah,
and it was Table of Comets
or Comments.
Comets. So I thought it was funny they had this Table of Comets lying around.
Feedback.
Was it like a coffee table book with pictures of comets?
It was just this big like binded black book.
Yeah, it was a star chart marking out where the comets were.
And so,
I don't know why that would be separate from just the other stuff.
Yeah, and it just seemed weird. I understand they had it laying around, I guess, because they're talking about it, but it just seemed weird and out of place that they just had this one book.
It's like a coffee table book.
And it's weird because Kirk handed it to Spock, and Spock was like, "Oh, it's made up of normal shit." This comet.
It's like when you're sitting around the ready room and
you're just bored,
and you're like, "Well, nothing's going on." Well, there's a coffee table
and so
book.
they were using it because they were talking about.
I'll get a cup of coffee.
They were using about the
Yeoman Rand.
they were talking about the quality of comets, so it happened to come in use. Yeah, and Kirk handed it to Spock as they're talking about this comet, and Spock's like, "Oh, there's nothing special about this comet," and he pushes the book down.
Right.
Kirk tries to give it to him, and he pushes it down. It's bizarre. I don't understand what's going on.
That was definitely weird.
I know exactly the scene you're talking about, but somehow I completely missed that exchange. All right.
Yeah.
So quick pop quiz, 3-question pop quiz, just for a little fun, and then we'll close out the episode
3
and let you know what we will be talking about next week. So, question number 1, and anyone can answer. Question number 1 is: what traditional Southern dish turns unripe fruit into a delectable delicacy?
Oh God, I know what the other two are. I'm guessing it's not chess pie.
What's the answer? You guys are pretending like you know the answer. It's okay if you don't know the answer.
Oh man,
fried green tomatoes.
Oh, that's right. Okay, Jesse gets 1 point.
I said it was chess pie.
All right. How about this? Question number 2. Which 1987 book?
God damn it.
Featuring bees, spousal abuse, juvenile amputation, and themes of feminine empowerment was later turned into a hit Hollywood film.
Do dogs dream of electric
Patriot
bones?
Games.
No. Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe.
It wasn't Dogs Dream of Electric Bones.
By Fanny Flagg.
Or Sheep.
Which I have to presume is a pen name, but I don't know for
Sheep
certain.
Run from Fiery Peanuts.
Fanny.
All right. Neither of you got that one.
Okay.
Question number 3. Jesse's leading. He's got 1 point. So if you want to bring it up to a tie, Dan, you've got to answer.
Is there a tiebreaker?
There's no tiebreaker.
Well, then what's
there is a tiebreaker. Okay, there will be a tiebreaker.
There's going to have to be.
So, question number 3
Fried green tomatoes.
No. Don't buzz in too early. Question number 3 is...
Just want to tie it up.
Where...
Oh, shit.
Where is the secret?
In the sauce.
There you go.
Boom.
Secret's in the sauce.
Tie
That's right.
game.
You
All
beat
right.
me to it.
So
you
the
son of a
tiebreaker
bitch.
it's an unfair tiebreaker because the tiebreaker
Because you just came up this second with it.
I just came up with it this second. Which
He didn't expect you to get any points.
which Star Trek character do you think enjoys either the book or film Fried Green Tomatoes?
Ooh, well.
Which Star Trek character?
You see,
someone who played an actor in Fried Green Tomatoes.
No. I think
I know
Spock's
who I think.
into it.
Spock could be into it.
I think Spock's into it. I mean,
Is this from any of the Star Trek?
The obvious
From any Star Trek.
You would expect McCoy to be into it.
I think Phlox. I think Phlox would be into
Bashir.
it. I think Phlox.
So
is
you
all
don't
about it.
even have an answer to your own question.
I'm saying I think Phlox would.
Wait, so but when you ask the question, you're not supposed to think you know the answer. You're supposed to know
I
the
think-
answer.
No, but I just told you. I just came up with this idea right now.
I think Cisco would be
but how
into it
is this a
from the culinary aspect, not necessarily from any.
But wait, there's no one telling us
Anything
whether
else.
it's right or wrong, so this does not fit the criteria of a tiebreaker.
Absolutely.
I stated that at the beginning. I said
No, you didn't say that. You
I
said
said
it
it was
was-
kind of a bullshit tiebreaker.
You said it was unfair. It's
If
not
you-
that it's unfair, it's that it's irrelevant.
No, it's not necessarily irrelevant. You could argue that if you gave
It's a no contest.
whoever gives a sufficiently interesting or entertaining
No
answer
quarter.
As
wins the
decided
point.
by who? You?
Me.
Well, you came up with Phlox, so you're gonna like Phlox the most.
So I get the point. We all tie.
So, shit,
Phlox.
we all tied.
Although I think there's a good argument that
We need to have a mud wrestling match to solve it.
Well, I'd be down.
Yeah.
I'd be down for that.
Who would be into fried green tomatoes?
You're my bee
McCoy.
charmer. You're my little bee charmer.
You think one of the lower decks?
'Cause he's- well, he's- 'cause he's Southern.
Because he's from the South.
Who,
Because
McCoy?
it's a
Oh, yeah.
southern dish. Although they do the Pennsylvania Dutch.
It's a low country.
The Pennsylvania
Yeah,
Dutch
that's
do a
true.
version of fried green tomatoes, and that's sort of unusual because they're in the north. Except they do it with regular old flour for the breading, whereas in the
as
south
opposed
it's
to
got to be
corn.
corn flour.
Yeah.
See, that's the kind of
Because the
thing that.
Pennsylvania Dutch, they're still deep frying everything. It's
Yeah.
just a flour base.
That's-
And you want to do a shallow fry on a fried green tomato because the corn flour doesn't really stick to it, and the tomatoes don't float because they're green.
I'll show you something that floats.
So they press down, and I read that on Wikipedia.
Wikipedia. So I was gonna say if someone was gonna be asked, like, if fried green tomatoes were gonna be approached in a Star Trek series, it would be like Lower Decks. So I would say it's a Lower Decks character, not Tendi because she's already into like taco and.
But she
tacos
is
and
green.
stuff. Well, that's just racist.
Yes, I will freely admit that. I am a white man in America. I am by definition racist. Unavoidable.
Maybe it's more of a Rutherford.
Trying to get better.
It's more of a Rutherford dish.
Yeah, I could see Rutherford being into fried green tomatoes.
What do you think Boimler's into?
Boimler's into all sorts of
He's
freaky
like-
stuff.
Ooh, yeah.
Not just like grain.
He's into a
Fried green Twinkies.
liquid lunch arena.
Fried green Twinkies. All right. So I think that will do it for us this week.
Nobody wins.
Nobody wins.
Means we all lose.
I always win.
I would argue.
Always win.
I would argue that anyone listening to this podcast
All I
also
do
has
is
not
win.
won.
Nope.
Has not won. I hope you got a lot of chores done.
Congratulations, you just wasted
You
your
just
time.
wasted a shitload of time.
Why did you listen?
Yeah, but definitely listen next week. 'Cause next
Why would
week-
you listen next week?
Next week. Okay, first of all, we've got a little bit of a break here between new Star Trek. It's a nice breather. I think we had 30 something.
It's a nice breather, not an
Oh, yeah,
icebreaker.
they kept overlapping
It was just
all the
endless Star
shows.
Trek, and I like endless Star Trek, but it was getting to me.
Yeah,
man.
it was
There
a
was
lot of
Discovery.
especially when they overlapped.
Yeah,
Man, that was-
Discovery
Picard.
and into Picard.
It was like
and,
breathless.
Well,
from
but
one
like,
to the
Oh my
next.
but
God.
like, what turned it into part marathon was like the little bumps where they'd overlap, and we had
Oh,
to do
I
like
had
two at the same time.
Oh, and Discovery had that break.
yeah. So we did a couple episodes during the break, but then we're straight back into.
And then,
But regardless,
They could have
It
held
was
off.
murder.
They
It was
could have held
murder.
off on that break and just played them all back to back,
Yes.
so they didn't have to
yeah,
overlap.
I
was
hope, they,
murder.
I hope they learn that because that was, as a Star Trek fan who loves endless Star Trek, give us at least a week break in between series. so
Paramount
we can focus
neutral.
on them. And that's
Oh,
not
shit.
the podcaster Patrick. That's fan Patrick. Just is like there's only so much. There's a lot of stuff to watch. Okay, so come on. But
on.
they're giving us that nice little break. Lower Decks. It's been announced. I think it's late August 25th, something like that. That Lower Decks starts.
And
So
I've been rewatching the first season, and it's super
Lower
good.
Decks
Oh,
is
yeah, it's
fantastic.
great.
So
Super good.
We're looking forward to that.
I think you've inspired me to. I think I'm going to rewatch.
It's so awesome. I'm
Yeah.
like I was saying earlier, but I
It
think before the
starts out
podcast,
really, really
I wasn't
good.
I wasn't like watching it and being like, oh, this is pretty good for a second time. I was like, oh, this is awesome.
Yeah, Lower Decks is fucking rad, and
It's fucking rad.
it's one of my favorite Star Treks. So we look forward to talking about Lower Decks in the intervening weeks.
Because there's people that like to hate on it.
We'll do.
Yeah.
Well, who cares?
Well, I just think it's fun to
trash people.
trash those people.
We will be discussing other
Bag
Star
your
Trek episodes
face.
and maybe some general topics and things like that. If you have a topic you'd like us to talk about,
Maybe
you can send it in.
My
to
name's General
some
Topic.
commander topics.
feedback at itsgotstartrek.com,
Admiral topics.
or you can get us on Twitter
I'm
at
Admiral Subject.
at It's Got Star Trek.
Topicology.
And you can send us in topics if you want us to talk about something. But for
Commander
next week,
question.
next week we're going to go back to good old fashioned season 2 Deep Space Nine.
Oh.
And we're going to discuss the episode Whispers,
Whispers.
which is a classic Let's Abuse O'Brien
Oh.
episode. It's a fun episode from a character standpoint.
fun to
sci-fi.
abuse O'Brien.
So season 2, I think it's episode, I want to say 14.
We almost chose another one,
Yeah,
but that was
14-ish.
an abuse O'Brien episode that wasn't fun.
That
It
was a
wasn't-
less fun. You all know the one we're talking about.
This
You
one's
can-
clever.
You can guess. There's a lot of Abuse O'Brien episodes, but there's that one particular one that's especially fucked up. Maybe we'll talk about it in the future. It's like
Think about the future.
It'd be hard to think about that in an entertaining way. We do try to have fun and be goofy on this podcast. But anyway, so yeah, get in touch with us if
Do you
you're,
think we
if
get
you're into that
Do you
sort
think
of
we
thing.
get into wacky shenanigans?
Light Star Trek.
At It's Got Star Trek, feedback at itsgotstartrek.com.
Do you think we get into wacky? Do you think we're into wacky
www.itsgotstartrek.com.
shenanigans?
I think you were about
wackyshenanigans.com.
93% wacky shenanigans.
YouTube.
I'll take that number.
YouTube. A lot of people are listening to us on YouTube, which is great. I guess you can cast to your TV or something. Listen to it.
Patrick still doesn't understand it.
No, I understand it
He
because
doesn't
I do
understand
it.
his YouTube thing.
No, I understand. I do it. I understand it.
I
get
do
it. I get the vibe. It's I don't know. I'm more of
I
a
watched you watch.
I'm more of a podcast app person, but
watched you
to each their own. We provide it out there because we want people to enjoy and listen. So if you're watching on YouTube, we hope you enjoyed listening to this while watching a static image
Yeah, man.
on your device.
Who's going to pay $1,000 for a used couch? Really?
Are you looking used couches?
Who's going to
again?
pay $1,000 for a new couch?
Well, a lot of people,
We live in the
actually.
Washington
I
D.C.
know,
area,
yeah.
which is a high cost of living area, and even secondhand stuff is absurd.
I mean, but most people are reasonable enough to keep it at 100 or below. But every once in a while, you see these
got
$1,000
that-
And
It's
most
got that butt stink
and
going.
most podcasts are reasonable enough to keep it at about 1 hour 30, which we're past now.
We are not,
we could
not a reasonable podcast.
we can save on the couch talk. It's not relevant. We don't need to pad any space. So I think now is a good
That's
time
odds and
that if we were
ends,
wanting to save some space on the episode, we could stop
We could cut
talking
it.
about the catch.
We could cut it.
Catch. I said catch. I said catch.
Stop talking about the couch.
Okay. So
What are you talking about?
next week,
What are you talking about? What are you talking about?
Deep Space Nine Whispers, Season 2, I think Episode 14. You'll figure it out in the Paramount app.
It doesn't matter.
However you want to get it.
Nothing matters.
Until next week, we had a lovely time talking at you.
Quite.
We hope you had derived some form of info entertainment out of the process.
But not infotainment, because that shit's lame.
All right, so we will talk to you.
I mean, in theory, it's a good idea. In theory, infotainment and edutainment should be awesome, but in execution, they're usually lame.
We will talk to you.
Learning should not be fun.
About Star Trek next week.
I mean, I like the idea of it. It just rarely works.
Goodbye.
I'm just kidding.
I wish I were on a long sea voyage somewhere. Not too much deck tennis, no frantic dancing, and no responsibility.